Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage here on MMA World and MMA UK, and of also replaying live on the official Beyond the Cage YouTube channel. I am your host, Jim Graham. Joining me today will be my co-host, Kayla Bailey, who returns from her week in Los Angeles covering Bellator 192, the kickoff event for Bellator MMA in 2018. That was at the Fabulous Forum in Irvine, California, and also their debut on the Paramount Network. We're also going to talk about UFC 220, Bellator 193, and UFC Charlotte, aka UFC on Fox 27, coming up this weekend. So let me get Kayla on the program. We'll get rocking and rolling on another edition of Beyond the Cage here on MMA World and MMA UK. And thanks to everybody for joining this week. And Kayla, how are you doing this week?
Hey, good. How are you?
I am doing great. The weather is starting to warm up just a little bit here in the winter in Michigan, so that's nice. And of course, this weekend we had a fantastic weekend of packed mixed martial arts action.
So fast.
You were cage side there at Bellator 192. I was holding down the fort watching the pay-per-view, UFC 220, and then I watched Bellator afterwards. I love DVR. And then luckily I still got the Paramount Network. I'm sure that maybe confused some people looking for Spike in their lineup and not seeing it there. We'll talk
Yeah,
about that.
they were really trying to have us push that it's a rebranded, same
Right.
channel, just so people wouldn't be confused. But it was so hilarious to see people set up like three different, because we had the boxing match going on too. And
Okay.
even on press row, someone had UFC 220. They had the Errol Spence boxing match going on, and then we were watching Bellator live. Like, people were getting so clever with the way they had stuff set up. It was hilarious.
You know what's funny? If you were the other way around and you were covering the UFC event and there was a Bellator event going on, I almost guarantee the UFC would have been cracking down on the amount of people watching Bellator. Whereas the other way around, where it's like, yeah, okay, we get it.
You're probably right.
I guess I wonder how many people at the UFC event were trying to sneak in Bellator though, either on their phone or some other device to not make it look obvious. Like, yeah, I'm watching Bellator too. Those, reporters probably were. They're trying to be like, oh, I'm up to date on everything. So I guarantee there was people trying to sneak some Bellator.
Yeah, no, I definitely think you're right. Unless you have a team where you can send one to each event. And it was such a fun event and a stacked card with, I don't know, we'll obviously get more into it, but there was very entertaining fights. So I know if I was at UFC, I definitely would want to be at least checking like Twitter updates.
For sure. Okay, so I want to start there. I want to start with Bellator since that technically started first before UFC 220. So I want to start there and obviously since you were there live, I figure obviously we got to start there as well. Now, was this your first event that big event that you've covered live? I wasn't sure.
I've done a few press weeks with them, but sadly, I've always had to leave before fight night just because of, other outside factors of having to work at a sports bar and weddings and different things. So this was my first time I actually got to do the full press week of, interviews, press conferences, and then actually get to see the fight happen live. And the seats were awesome. The venue was just great. And the energy in there was super fun. Obviously, it's local too, so that was nice.
Right. Before we get to more things, we got a couple of highs from Ray, Ryan, and Miles. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us again this week. Now, would you say it was a sellout, or would you say there was? I think the forum probably holds 20,000 or so people. I think. Would you say there was that many there? Would you say 15?
I'm so bad at this at guessing guessing numbers, but it definitely was what I would say, like, if it wasn't full, it was very close to being full. And what was really awesome is before it was even the live events, like there was people seated in the seats for who's the first fight. I mean, because we had Conry Gracie, who was the fight before him that everyone was excited about? Joey Davis. I know a lot of those guys are local too, so maybe their family and friends were packed in there, but it was really nice to see you hear about MMA events, how people don't show up until the last 4 fights on the card. And this actually had a pretty full, I'd say about a little more than half in the beginning. And then by the time, of course, Rampage and Chael came out, that place was packed.
Yeah, you're talking about Hoist Gracie's son, Cronny Gracie, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. That was actually his professional debut.
Yes.
He did lose, so I'm sure. I know a couple of friends were there, and they ran into Hoist. And Hoist is actually usually a pretty nice guy. He's pretty liberal with signing autographs and stuff. And so my friends went as fans, so they were like, "Hey, would you sign this?" And he gave them a not so great signature, which is very un-Hoist Gracie like. And some people cited his son losing to that, and I was like, yeah, that would put you in a bad mood to really be excited for the rest of the fights when that happens, especially when that was the 4th or 5th fight of the night, and you still got how many hours left, and you got to stand there being like, I'm Hoist Gracie.
Yeah, I'm sure that he probably wanted to be there for his son, and then of course everyone wants to talk to him about the fight, and I think he is a brand ambassador, definitely a representative of Bellator right now, so he probably was committed to staying there. But I had a nice moment with Hoist pre-fight during press week, and he's agreed to come on to MMA World and MMA UK. I think we booked February 12th, so we're going to do a live interview with him. So you guys make sure you stay tuned for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I would love to hear what he has to say, kind of what's going on in MMA, how that differs to when he started 25 years ago. And just what he's doing now. What's a day in the life of Hoist Gracie? So I think it'll be very interesting, because I know actually he owns several academies, but he actually owns an academy about 15 miles from me in Southgate, Michigan. So I'm sure he has academies all over Brazil and the United States as well. So that'd be a cool question to ask him. Like, how many times do you stop at your various academies? How many do you plan to open more? Are you good?
I'll start writing all these questions down.
Stuff like that. But let's get to the fights, though. The main card fights, obviously 5 fights. Like we said, shown on the Paramount Network. It just simply is a rebranding. It's no longer Spike. It's now Paramount. So I was kind of joking about people not knowing where it was, but you got to believe that happened to some people. They were looking their guide for Spike, and they didn't see it, even though it probably said Bellator MMA. People don't pay attention. And it took me a second, too, when I went to go record it. I was like, wait, am I going to get this channel? I was like, I hope it just switches, so I'm sure there was a little bit, but I think now the first event's out of the way. I think people will start to get used that that's what it's called now. And the fact that more events will not be at the same time with the UFC. So I think the numbers we saw for that event are going to go up. And also, even you were there live, so this didn't affect you, but if you were just watching in California or the Pacific time zone, you would have had to wait until 9 o'clock your time, the Pacific time, for it to actually come on the network, which makes no sense to me at all. People don't care about watching it at a weird time. That's why DVRs exist. If it starts 9 Eastern and it's 6 Pacific and you're doing something at 6, you record it. People don't want to go, well, I wish it was shown later. It doesn't matter now. So just show it when it happens, and people will accept that. I don't know. It's still boggling me that they're doing this. I don't know.
Yeah, and I feel like that question gets asked every time they put on an event, every time that they have press week. When are you guys going to fix this issue of the streaming later? And they keep saying that they're going to work on it. I know that Gareth and a few other outlets that are representing the UK and myself too, we were all saying I don't even think that they were showing it out there. Or that if it was on like a very exclusive channel. So it was really hard to kind of promote and push this fight, for fans out there if they weren't even going to be able to get to see it, unless they can illegally stream it or something. But they say that it's something they're working on. They obviously are very aware that fans, the MMA community want to watch it live. So let's hope that 2018 Bellator and Paramount can figure something out and get that fixed.
Yeah, and I feel like it's even
Gotta love DVR.
Worse
Yeah,
for
right.
Bellator kickboxing. Like, it's even worse. And I know that's not the MMA branch, but it's still part of their organization. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like it's worse because those events are a week tape delayed, which even makes way worse sense than a couple hours. A couple hours, I can kind of go, all right, I get it, but a week, come on. Like, so that it's something they really have to fix, and it's something that doesn't seem like it's that hard to fix. It really doesn't.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what the issue is, but just with the times of 2018, I mean, everyone's going to post some sort of video or tweet or update or something that to have, streaming a week later, people will find a way to watch it before that comes out just to feel,
Yeah, or they'll see the results. I mean, you
Instagramming
can't stop.
videos.
Yeah, you can't stop us in the press and media from reporting on something when it happens. So,
Yeah.
a lot of people don't like spoilers. For me with fights, it doesn't bother me as much because I still like watching how it happened. Even if someone told me, like, Bellator was in the background, obviously, when I was watching the UFC fight at my local Buffalo Wild Wings. Shout out to them if they give me some free stuff. Um, but I saw a couple of the winners, but I wasn't like, oh man, now I know who won. It never. That's me though, and one of the reasons it fights because it's 15 minutes. I can watch through something 15 minutes. Now a score ruined of a 3-hour football game, then I get a little,
Yeah.
then I get a little mad because I'm not going to sit and watch 3 hours. Like, well, how did the Packers win this week, or how did the Eagles win and make it to the Super? That would bother me. But for a 15-minute fight or what it could only be a 3-minute fight, or 30-second fight, it don't bother me much. But all right. Let's get to the action that actually took place in the cage. First fight of the main card, Henry Corrales against Georgie Karakhanyan. I think this was, I hate to say to my own horn, but I kind of called the upset here. I felt like Karakhanyan is a guy that is supremely talented, obviously being a former World Series of Fighting champion. But really since coming to Bellator, I feel like he's been pretty mediocre. Really, other than his 2 explosive wins over Bubba Jenkins, I haven't really been that impressed with him. And you look at someone on the other side like Henry Corrales, this guy comes into Bellator on, I believe he was undefeated. Then he gets thrown 3 of the best featherweights in the world, loses to them. And you can go, well, okay, he's not elite. Like, well, no one should step in and beat those 3 guys. I don't know if anyone's beating those 3 guys in a row like that. So
Right.
I think taking that and seeing what it takes to get to the top, having fought those 3 guys, then has now come back, and I believe this now either caps his 3rd win in a row? Let me double check this. And also, again, shout out to our friend Miles. I know he's watching. He wrote a great preview about Henry Corrales coming into this fight. This is now his 3rd win in a row. And again, these are solid guys. Cody Bollinger, Noad Lahat, and now Georgie Karakhanyan. You can see a career progression, and that's one of the reasons why I thought Henry Corrales would perform well in this fight, because he's had that experience. He wouldn't be afraid of fighting Karakhanyan basically in his backyard there at the Forum, training with Millennium out there in Rancho Cucamonga. So I think he was ready for this moment, and he actually performed. Karakhanyan, once again, had a pretty lackluster performance to me, and no surprise that Corrales walks away with the victory.
Yeah, watching this fight live, it was an exciting fight. I don't know if it was because it was the main, first in the main, but both guys did seem like they were, keeping it competitive. But I think, like you said, Henry, he really credits where he's training now. He credits all of those losses that he suffered and going on Murder's Row, they called it, or against Murder's Row. And I think that's what, like you said, I just love the progression of his career unfolding. One thing I was a little excited about with Georgie, and I know you'd probably be excited about this, and you saw that he was there, but Georgie had been training with Nate Diaz for a little bit, so I was kind of excited to see if the fight was going to go to the ground, if we were going to see some of the work he's worked on with Nate, who was there sitting right in front of me. I know that you have a few of their are they the bobbleheads?
There he is.
Yeah.
He looks just like him, right?
So I'm a little disappointed that we didn't get to see some of that, jits work on the ground. But it still was a very exciting fight, a great fight to open up, the main card. And yeah, shout out to Henry. It just seems like you said, he's really evolving and knowing what it takes now to fight against the elite and eventually get that title shot. I respect fighters like that. You know, I feel like people in a division where Demetrius Johnson is the champ and just so dominant, well, those guys are all training because they eventually want to fight that guy. And I feel like Henry now fighting some of the top guys in his division, he knows now what it takes to, or what he has to work on in camp, you know, to eventually get up there again. But really cool dude. Very humble in his victory, and I'm excited to see what happens from next.
All right, we got a quick question from our El Capitan there, and Peter. He was wondering, what was your highlight of covering Bellator?
Oh man, someone asked me this earlier or last week. I don't know if I can think of a highlight, because what's so fun about, and you know, Jim, you can maybe add to this too, just working live events. I was trying to tell my friend, it's almost like you're putting on like a theater production all week long. You guys are coming together, trying to bring awareness to this event. You're getting invested in the fighters and their story, and then all of a sudden it's show night and the event's put on and you see it all come together and play out. And it's so fun to be there live and be a part of it all week. But I guess one of my highlights was probably just being around the press conference with all the heavyweights. Being there in a scrum with Fedor was super cool. You know, just being around some of those veterans of the sport. Chael too. I really enjoyed my time that I got with Chael and interviewing with him. He's a very cool guy. So I guess maybe that.
Everything besides that Rory McDonald Red King Everlast press conference, right?
Yeah.
You know, I don't mind them doing a press conference about it. I don't think it should have been something separate. I think it should have been within the main press conference. And number two, if you're going to launch a product, how do you not have it there at the event? I mean, it's not like you hadn't planned this out for months, right? I mean, at least just for the event, even if it's just like, oh, we only got 50 T-shirts. If that's all, I mean, if that's all you got, that's all you got. But at least you put it out there. You start slow. You don't go, well, we're not going to have them at the event. When are you going to have them? I don't know, in 6 months maybe? What?
And you know, I don't want to bash on anybody's way of business or anything, but after that, you know, surprise announcement of Rory and Everlast getting together, and if you guys don't, you know, if you guys didn't tune in for that part, what we're talking about is Rory now has a not even apparel line, but it's a couple of items with Everlast under his new, you know.
Right, it's like LeBron James shoes under Nike or any other, you know, obviously Jordan started with Nike, his own brand of shoes, and they actually just made his a separate company. So obviously that's like, I guess, the dream as far as an athlete goes, but it's just right. Roy McDonald branded Everlast gear. It's really what it is.
But it was so interesting because after they had finished the press conference, I went up there, you know, streaming live, and I wanted to at least get some of the apparel up close, and they kind of like pulled it away really fast, and I'm thinking, wait, I thought that's what this is about, to, you know, showcase this new brand and new gear. Yeah. But maybe they have plans to do something with it later.
But here's the thing, printing off T-shirts are not that hard. I get not having gloves ready to go or shin guards or anything else fancy type of equipment, but to not have like 50 shirts that just have that logo on it and a black cotton T-shirt is pretty ridiculous to me. Yeah. It's not that hard to do that. All right, let's move on. Aaron Pico, I was a little critical of his opponent, not in terms of skill, but in terms of why is he fighting a guy that's 12-3, despite coming off about a 2-year layoff. It just seems like, can they find someone a little more to his record? I don't know. It just seemed a little odd to me, but I was dead wrong. I will admit, Aaron Pico beat the brakes off of Shane Critchin, hit him with that body shot, crumpled him in 37 seconds. I guess I got you a little crow on this one. I didn't think it was that Aaron Pico couldn't win. It's just I thought, I don't know, I just don't like these matchups. I feel like it could be setting up a kid that they're trying to build up a little bit for failure. That's all, because I do want to see this kid succeed. I think he does have skills. So I was glad to see him win, but you know, I was a little critical of that. I still think that's something they got to fix. But other than that, he performed. I mean, that's about as good as it gets. I mean, that's how you want to win every fight. You want to get out there, get a finish, and not get hurt in the process. And he did exactly that.
Yeah, no, I think what they're trying to do with Aaron is he believes, his team believes that he can take on some of these guys that have more experience in there. I think they were also really trying to build up Shane. Shane has a very cool story of why he's fighting. He was doing really well at World Series of Fighting over there. So I don't know if it had a matter of that they're both local Cali guys or what story they were trying to build there. But yeah, devastating hit from Aaron. Like you said, 37 seconds in. I think if anyone was questioning him after his debut, he's now given us two really exciting performances. I'm excited just to see him, be in there longer, which is something he had mentioned in press week, is he just wants to get as much experience and time in the cage, and just so he can, not only prove to other people, but just kind of showcase everything he's working on, since he's training with some of the best people out there. But he really credits his Team Body Shop. And like you said, 37 seconds and barely getting touched. I'm sure he's going to be back in there soon.
Yeah, I like to see him back soon because.
And I want to see Shane back too, because I believe in Shane's skills as well.
Oh, thank you, Ray. Yes, I am big enough to admit when I'm wrong, because this, you can't just have a definite mindset in this sport when picking fights. You got to know, like, well, I got that one wrong, and you got to do it. So, should they forget the old fighters? I don't know if they necessarily should forget them, Joe, but I would say they shouldn't have put Chal and Rampage in the main event. I think they got to use them as a stepping stool for the younger talent, to help boost the younger talent, instead of just promoting the old names or the old guard. So that's what I'll say. I would say you gotta have some of that element, because you want to draw casual people, you want to draw old fans in, but you don't want to make it all about them. You want to push the stars that you do have. You want to push the people actually fighting for world championships. And so that's where I would try to tone it down. Your Shamrock and Gracie threes, your Kimbo versus your Dadas, you know what I mean? Your Tito versus Chals even. So I would say that stuff has its place, but it shouldn't take over guys competing for world championships, especially when you have, in this event, two guys that are considered the best at their weight class.
That was definitely the controversy of the week, and something that was being brought up, I think, every day in press week. Why, even though they mentioned that it was still a double main event, why did
no such thing
close the show? And really, the probably closest or most honest answer we got is that, I forgot who said it, so I don't want to say that it was Scott Coker, but it was obviously someone either from Paramount or Scott himself. But they mentioned that they didn't want someone to change the channel after Chael and Rampage and not, finish out the rest of the event. But like you said, I would hope that the two best welterweights, or at least, in the top three, would be able to.
I would disagree with that, because I would say if that fight, the Chael versus Rampage, was what the exciting part was, and you can make a case maybe it wasn't that great of a fight, that people would stick around saying, hey, we got one more fight, it's a title fight. You kind of already invested your time. I mean, think about it. If you're a fan that just wanted to watch Rampage and Chael Sonnen, and you watch these other three fights before it of names you don't know, I think there's a pretty good chance you would stick around and watch the other one. You know what I mean? Why?
But this might also be where, the lack of pay-per-view comes into play. If you buy a pay-per-view and say on the card, out of 4 fights, the first 3 just completely let you down, you're probably still going to watch the main event, because you just spent 50,
you already
60
bought it.
bucks.
Right.
If it's so quick and easy to just change the channel, I guess I can kind of see that from the business aspect, but then I also see why some people were upset, because I think, like you said, even though these guys have built their names and built and are bringing in this draw, I think that they even felt a little uncomfortable with the title fight, a world title, not being, the last fight on the card. And what was interesting is, one of my friends that's in press, Gabriel Gonzalez, he had an interview with Alimale McFarlane, who mentioned that she wanted to be on the card with Fedor and Frank. And he said, okay, but it looks like now those Grand Prix fights are going to be taken as the ones that are going to be the main events or the last fight on the card. Is that okay with you, that even though it's a title defense, they might not be the main event? And she said that she was someone that didn't have an issue with that. But I wonder if that's probably going to be a conversation they're going to have with all these champions.
I hate to discredit Lima Lay because I have interviewed her before, and she is an incredible fighter. But I would say the thing is, she's maybe not considered the consensus number one at her weight class. I think that's fair to say, right? That's not being me, right? That's fair. So, whereas Rory and Douglas, you can make a case and I think that's why you got to take it a little bit circumstance. I'm not saying every time Bellator has a title fight, it should be the main event. Now, in the case of Alimale versus take your pick, or Fedor versus Frank Mir, I would say in that instance, it's okay to have Fedor versus Frank be the main event. I'm okay with that. But for this fight, I would disagree. I think the main event should have been Rory and Douglas because those are two of the best. That's clear. There's no debate about that. You can kind of debate the other ones, and obviously both people are kind of known quantities, I guess, a little bit. If you've been following Bellator even somewhat casually, you probably have heard Douglas Lima. He's been on some of those big tentpole and quote-unquote freak show fights, and Rory's obviously fought for a UFC championship, so there's some appeal there, where, again, even though I'm a huge fan of Alima Lay, she's still new. She's only had one basically kind of big fight in the spotlight. So I kind of get that, and that's a great way to build her up, having her be the co-main event on this first for her first title defense, and then put her as the main event later on in the year if she's successful in that defense, because you're able to build her up by having those people watch, the bigger, more name event.
And build that division too. It's
right. That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm not trying to. It's similar, but a little different. And I think more people, if that's what happens, she does indeed fight on that card in Chicago. I don't think there would be as many questions about it being the co-main event as there were for this one.
Right. Yes, it's case by case.
But all right, let's get to Michael Chandler versus Goti Yamauchi. Pretty dominant performance by Michael Chandler. I thought that Yamauchi might give him some trouble with his submission game.
Right.
Michael Chandler shut that down. Yamauchi really didn't have really much offense other than that opening minute and a half in round 2 where he landed some very nice kick and punch combinations. But other than that, Chandler was able to take this fight to the ground and really smash him with some hard shots. Yamauchi definitely, you could tell he had been in a fight afterwards. He got battered pretty bad by Michael Chandler, who after the fight was pretty dismissive of fighting Brent Primus for his fight, which I found a little interesting. He said he has other challenges. I'm not really sure who that would be. He's pretty much, other than Will Brooks, he's beaten everybody there is to beat at 155 pounds in the Bellator division. So I'm not really sure who he's alluding to. I'm assuming he's not talking about Josh Thompson, because I don't think at this stage in Josh Thompson's career that's that big a deal if he beats Josh Thompson. So I was trying to rack my brain who he was talking about. I'm not really sure. So that was a little interesting to me that he was kind of dismissive of, getting back that title and getting back that kind of fluke win that Primus had last summer.
Yeah, it was interesting because Goti had the opportunity to, I believe he's tied right now for most submission or consecutive submissions in his division. And I had asked him about that. I'm like, obviously this is talked as a title contender fight or title eliminator fight, but then you also have this record that you could break in the back of your head. Which things are going through your head of what's most important to you with this specific one. And he said, I'm not even going to try to think about all that stuff. I know I'm not sleeping on Michael Chandler. And he did mention, though, that most of his submissions, he felt it was because someone took him to the ground and he was able to capitalize on that. Obviously, he wasn't able to get it done with Michael Chandler. And, Chael had a nice moment of even talking about Michael Chandler in the press conference at the end. And he really is. He's just so skilled all over the place, in every aspect there. And Michael Chandler said, people question me on the ground or stand up and against certain guys, and they shouldn't, because look, I can give you a dominant performance. When asked about Brent Primus, he just really he definitely has an opinion there and starts getting kind of almost emotional with that. I don't know. I think that he eventually, if he has to, would go after that belt. But I also kind of get the sense that he doesn't even really look at Brent Primus as a champion. Maybe because of the way that things unfolded, but he seems like he's saying that that fight doesn't interest him for his next one. He hinted at possibly moving up to welterweight, so maybe those are the fights that he's kind of alluding to. And then again, I had a friend that spoke with him that their conversation was weird because he said he didn't hint that his contract is almost out, but he also said too that he's not afraid of looking at other options outside of Bellator, which I thought was really interesting because he's obviously always been a Bellator guy, and his post-fight interview mentioned that he is a company man and going to do whatever the boss tells him next. So I think he's not interested in that title shot. I think he's interested in either seeing if he can move up or possibly being a free agent.
I've interviewed Michael Chandler. He's a pretty cool guy, but Michael, if I have any advice for you, and you take this for what it's worth, don't move up. Don't do it. If you saw those two guys in the co-main event, those guys are absolute monsters. And I don't really think that would be a good idea. I'd say stick to 155, whether that's in this organization or another. That's all I'll say about that. All right, speaking of that co-main event. Now, obviously, I want you to tell me how you thought you saw it live. Now, a lot of people online seem that they felt that Douglas Lima maybe somehow got robbed, or they really thought that, people were trying to push that, Rory McDonald, of course, they wanted him to win that fight and all that. And I sat down, I watched it objectively as I could after seeing kind of some of the tweets and stuff come in, and I thought Rory won. I thought it was, to me, clear that he won 1, 2, and 5. I would have gave Lima 3 and 4. And really, even the 2 rounds I gave Lima, you could have been like, well, I feel like there was a little bit of an argument. But I feel like 1, 2, and 5, you can't argue for Lima. You can't argue that he won those rounds. And so, to me, it was like, well, if Rory for sure won 3, then regardless of how you scored the other 2, whether you gave him to Lima or not, then that was Rory's fight. You also add in, you could very easily call round 5 a 10-8, which I think one judge did, and I think that's fair. I mean, he took him down right away, and he held him there the rest of the 5 minutes. That, in the new ruling, that constitutes a 10-8 round. And he did land damage, too. It's not like there was definitely damage there. And so, while, yes, Douglas had success in this fight, yes, he did some things I said on the pre-fight show in the preview where I said he has to throw that leg kick, he has to pump the jab, he has to keep the distance. He didn't do that enough to get the victory. Rory was able to come inside on too many occasions, was able to get double underhooks either up against the cage or in the middle and get the takedown. And Douglas, while I think Douglas does have a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's not at a level that I think is going to submit somebody like a Rory McDonald. I think he can catch guys in his guard, but I don't think he's going to be able to catch somebody like Rory. So while, yes, Douglas executed his game plan pretty well, it wasn't enough. Rory was able to overcome that and do what he's able to do, which is get top position. He's really kind of evolved into being more of that fighter, and I felt got the victory.
Yeah, they talk about if it's going to go to decision, which one thing I had said that night, I said, and if I can wish for anything with this fight night, I want Rory and Douglas to go all 5 rounds. And I'm so happy that it did, just because I wanted to see their skills play out. And obviously, like we said, it was 2 of the top welterweights. But they talk about how if you're going to, win a title, when it comes down to decision, you have to take it from the champ. And I really feel like Rory did. Yes, there was all the drama of him fighting through that nasty hematoma on his leg. And, people, I guess, question if those kind of things can kind of sway the judges of, oh, man, he fought through that. But he did. He fought through it and gave a dominant performance. Like you said, that last round there, I mean, Douglas just, he couldn't defend the dominance that Rory had of that takedown. I was looking for him to capitalize on knowing that Rory's leg was injured, but Rory played that game smart. And, it ended up being another bloody fight. I really feel like he definitely won that title and is well deserving of that. What's next for him? I just feel like he has quite a few people that are already kind of throwing their name in the mix. Who do you see his first title defense being?
Probably Andrei Korzhikov. I think
Okay,
that's
that's what Ray was
that's
just
it
asking, I
to
believe.
do it against. I'm not. Yeah, I think that's you probably have Douglas either fights MVP or rematch Paul Daly, and then he's right back in there against the winner of Korzhikov versus Rory. Either way, you have a trilogy with Douglas and Korzhikov, or you have a great rematch between Douglas and Rory. It sets up, I think, pretty well.
Totally.
And real quick, one thing I had a problem with, and it may have affected the outcome. I think it was the third round. That's when Rory. No, that was the fourth round when he got dropped. Douglas took him out, but eventually Rory kind of worked himself back into full guard, and then immediately Jason Herzog stood them up. I did not like that at all. I thought that was a complete bad move, completely disrespectful to Douglas Lima, because if you look at round 5, Rory stood inside Douglas's guard for basically 5 minutes. So how does that not warrant a stand-up? But Rory just getting back to full guard, you're not allowing Douglas to try to reestablish a dominant position. You stand that up. I don't get the two. I would really like to hear what. I don't think the referees usually, from when I remember covering events, it's been a while, but usually referees don't do it. But that would be one thing I would like to ask Jason. Be like, why did you stand them up right there
In that moment?
I didn't see a moment. He didn't give him enough time to me to work. Now, if I would have heard a warning like, all right, Douglas, let's go, you got to work. If I would have heard something like that, but it was almost instantly, Rory recovers full guard, and he's like, oh, stand up. And I'm like, what? That didn't make any sense to me. All right, but I wanted to at least throw that out there. All right, getting to what was the main event. Chow won.
The last of the double main events.
Really, to me, the only round I really thought Chow won was round 2. That, to me, was the most clear-cut round for either guy. I can kind of see giving Chow round 1, even though, honestly, I could easily see someone scoring this fight 29-28 for Rampage. Because you can make a case he won the first round. I don't think he got taken down in that first round. If he did, it was briefly. He landed a couple power shots. Round 3, definitely Rampage won. I think most people would agree that. But again, you can kind of mix in, well, maybe Chow won. And so that's where I kind of see Chow clearly won one round, and the other 2 is an argument. And so when one guy clearly wins a round, you kind of see, well, he's probably going to get the victory. So I'm not saying it was a robbery or anything like that, but I would say considered how much uproar I saw over the Lima McDonald fight, I thought I would have seen a lot more uproar about this main event, Rampage Chow, because I thought it was a lot closer than what like the indicated or a lot of people were kind of tweeting out. You know, if you just look at a lot of reports and tweets and articles, it kind of made it sound like Chow dominated Rampage. I don't think that at all. I think he was just able to get by Rampage Jackson. He did just enough to get the victory.
Yeah, that first round was super close, and I think watching it live, I favored it more in Rampage, but the more that I looked into it, I think that they said Chael slightly outstruck Rampage, and I think it was just a matter, too, of that maybe once he did get him on the ground, there was some more activity. Obviously, he went for that submission attempt. I don't know if it was, like, dominant activity, but I don't know if that's kind of what swayed the judges there, but and then, you know what, one thing I can say about that fight is I think that a lot of people were assuming that it was going to go one of 2 ways. Rampage was going to knock him out, or Chael was just going to get him on the ground and lay on him, maybe give a little bit of ground and pound. But I want to say I was pleasantly surprised that it was a more exciting fight than I was expecting. I wasn't expecting Chael to stand up and bang it out with Rampage for as long as he did. I thought the submission attempt it was nice to just see these guys be a little bit more active than I think people were giving them credit for, because again, people just kind of looked at this as like, hey, we're throwing in these old guys that just have big names. Do they still even got it anymore? And that was something that Chael even mentioned in the press conferences. He said, he says that he wanted to pursue boxing actually back in the day, but had chosen to go for, a wrestling career and eventually MMA. So that was something he was kind of keeping a little hidden. He kept talking about taking the fight to the ground, but he had a game plan of standing and banging with Rampage to try and, confuse him in there. And it got him the win. Yeah, I know that people were a little, there was controversy over who was deserving of moving forward, but I was just happy that we got a more entertaining fight than I was expecting.
I mean, it was more entertaining than King Mo Rampage or even Rashad Evans Rampage, but it wasn't. I guess considering I thought, all right, you can make a case the co-main event wasn't the best fight ever, but it was a solid fight, very technical with two highly skilled individuals. So it was exciting from that point. And this fight was, it felt like Rampage was just so worried about the takedown, despite being the bigger guy, that it really hampered his striking ability. He was a lot more reserved than I think he should have been. I think he should have went a little more for it and just said, hey, Chow's probably going to take me down. I think if you get past that mental hurdle, like, all right, he's probably going to take me down, let me blast this dude. And I think had he done a little more of that in a close fight, that could make the difference. And instead of just saying, hey, I can't let him take me down, and maybe I can land a strike if I catch him coming in, that's a completely different mentality. And so for a guy that I'm a huge fan of, I always have been, I think maybe mentally, I think he kind of missed the boat on that. But, he's a veteran. He's fought a certain style his whole career. It's hard to change that style. But I feel like that little change in kind of philosophy may have got him the win in this. Just accepting that I'm probably going to get taken down instead of worrying so much about getting taken down.
Right.
I think it's so much more. It's not if you get taken down, it's what you do when it gets there. Mm-hmm. And I think if he would have fought more that way, going with the flow, so to speak, it may have gotten the victory. Maybe I'm speaking out of my butt, but I feel like that could have made the difference.
Well, either way, we have a winner, the first winner of the Grand Prix, advancing. Ray is asking, he said, Sonnen will fight Fedor or Mir. Who do you guys got for that fight?
Not Chael Sonnen.
I think that's going to be a tough one for him.
I don't pick him to beat either of those two gentlemen. I didn't pick him to beat Rampage. But if he was going to beat someone in this tournament, Rampage was probably going to be a guy he could beat just because of, like I said, he could possibly tie him up. But the other two guys actually have, well, especially Frank Mir. Does Chow really want to be on top of Frank Mir and that jiu-jitsu skills? I mean, that's. No. I know Chow just got his brown belt, but that's kind of been his Achilles heel over his career, was getting submitted. If you look at his career, it's now 30-15. I think he's been submitted like 13 times or something like that. So if anybody, and we're talking about arguably the greatest submission heavyweight of all time in Frank Mir, not a great matchup for him. And Fedor, that guy's an absolute monster. Good luck trying to hold him down for 15 minutes. Kevin Randleman on steroids couldn't do it. Let's get that twisted. I love Kevin Randleman. The dude was a monster, but he couldn't do it. Is Chow going to do it? Just basically, like he said, eating cheeseburgers and stuff? Trying to bulk up on weight? I don't think so. So, but actually Fedor against Mir, I might give a slight edge to Fedor just because he's been fighting more recently. We haven't seen Mir in a while. He looked pretty out of shape at that press conference. Maybe you can test that. He's obviously been a bigger guy, typically weighing in routinely over 250 pounds, but he looked like he was pushing 3 bills, Kayla. That did not look like a dude that was going to be fighting in 4 months, did it? Or am I speaking?
No, I think that he's someone that maybe doesn't wear as tight of clothing as some of these other guys.
I don't know. He looked pretty big, though. He looked bigger than he usually does. If not 300, at least 280. He would look like a big dude. I don't know if it was the kangaroo meat or what.
That could be strategy, maybe strategy of being the bigger guy. I don't think that he's sleeping on Fedor. I think that he's really taking this, return to MMA and Grand Prix seriously. That, and yes, he hasn't been as active competing, but he's definitely stayed on top of training. he has his daughter actually that I hope to set up an interview soon. She's about to make her break into the MMA scene, and I know that
Hmm.
he's really, just been not only training on his own, but obviously training with her too. And they have a really strict schedule. So he's been staying active as far as training, fight IQ. He's constantly going and calling fights, out for other organizations. So he's very in the know of what's going on in MMA and how he's needed to evolve as a martial artist, that I don't think we should completely count him out. But yeah, like you said, 4 months. So we'll see in these next 4 months if he can get down in shape. But I don't know, maybe it's strategy of just being the bigger guy against Fedor.
I hope he's been staying away from the kangaroo meat, because we all know that. I had to bring it up. But also, I am looking forward to him as a commentator for Bellator. He will be commentating now. I believe so. Now that Jimmy Smith has left, Big John obviously made his debut. Did a great job, by the way.
Yeah, he did.
They're obviously going to involve Chael more, but I think Frank Mir is also going to have some time in the announcer's booth with Goldberg as well.
Oh, good. I hadn't heard that, so that's great for him.
All right, Bellator 193, I'm going to go over it real quickly. Also in California, it's going to be down in Temecula at the Pachanga Resort and Casino. Lorenz Larkin taking on Fernando Gonzalez. Gonzalez at least admitted that he might not be able to make weight, so it's set at 180 pounds. Obviously, that favors Gonzalez because he's had some trouble making 170 in the past. However, this fight does have we talked about title challengers coming up next. This fight does have title potential, even though Larkin's lost his first 2 Bellator bouts. Gonzalez obviously had the fight against MVP. Wasn't a great fight by neither gentleman, but after that was able to get a victory over Brandon Gertz and then Brennan Ward. And so he's riding a 2-fight win streak. And he's and also, overall, I think he's won something like 7 out of his last, he's won like 9 out of his last 10 or something like that. That doesn't include his kickboxing bout against Paul Daly at the first ever Bellator Dynamite. I'd like to see that run back in MMA, which I think is a possibility if he doesn't get a shot after this. But obviously what hurts him is the fact that this is a catch weight. So even if he beats Larkin, Bellator is still going to look at, all right, we need you to, his last 3 fights, Kayla, have been catch weights. It was a 174 catch weight against Hurts. It was a 178 catch weight against Brennan Ward. And now it's a 180. It's gone up, which is not good. So I don't know if that means that Gonzalez wants to fight at middleweight or if it's just he's trying to work himself down to welterweight but doing it backwards or something. I don't know. But this is still a big bout with title contention for either guy, because even if Gonzalez wants to move up to 185, beating Larkin even at a catch weight, I think helps his case, because the 185 division is pretty shallow right now. You pretty much have, obviously, the champion Calvallo. You have Salter and Mousasi. That's pretty much it. I guess you could kind of make Shlemenko, but I think Shlemenko would have a tough time against Calvallo, and obviously even against Salter. Now, that fight was close with Shlemenko, the Mousasi one was, and I could actually see that fight getting run back. But I feel like at this stage, his career, Shlemenko's not getting any better. He's already in his late 30s. Can be a dangerous guy, but I don't think he's as good as those other 3 names I mentioned. That's all. Anyways, I think the biggest difference in this fight is going to be the speed of Larkin. He's a very fast individual with his kicks and his in and out movement, and Gonzalez is more of a plodding forward, in your face, very high volume striker. And whoever can establish their will in the striking game will win. I don't expect a lot of grappling from either individual. It's just can Gonzalez get inside to land the volume? And if he can't, are we going to see Larkin being able to effectively strike from the outside and avoid the brawl from Gonzalez?
Yeah, well, I think like you mentioned, very important fight for both guys, because with Gonzalez, it's giving him these opportunities to either be in the title talk with 170 or, like you said, middleweight's a little, light in there, and they want to obviously build Mousasi with exciting fights too. So as long as he performs well, I feel like he's still going to get some great fights ahead of him. And, and then of course, being the main event too, we know Larkin really needs a win here. Even though, it's hard because his two losses have been against top guys. It's been against, the former champ and then Paul Daly. But I'm intrigued that you said that you think that it's going to stay standing, because I've obviously noticed, Gonzalez, when he had a threat like Brennan Ward, who's dangerous on the feet, he was able to go and get that submission. So I was curious to see if he'd do something similar in this fight.
Possibly, but I think his style is a good counter to Lorenz, a guy that likes to strike on the outside. So forcing him to just strike on the outside and not come inside to the middle might be able to help Gonzalez. Or maybe, because I think he kind of learned from the MVP fight that staying back is not going to win him any fights. Because that's one of the reasons why that fight was so bad is Page stays on the outside. He's an outside striker. And Gonzalez wasn't willing to do what he does, and that's go after guys. So thus, you had a crappy fight. So if that happens with Larkin, it's going to be a crappy fight, and he's probably going to lose. I think it's going to be hard to outpoint Lorenz Larkin. I think that's very tough to do. I know you can say, well, Douglas Lima did it. Fernando Gonzalez is not Douglas Lima. They're different style of fighters. So that's why I say that. And you look, Paul Daly had success. He was able to come inside. What happens? He landed a counter, and he knocked out Larkin. Gonzalez can do that. So that's why I think he has to keep up to that mentality, throw the punches and bunches, and make Lorenz Larkin kind of almost force him to fight a perfect fight, circling, cutting angles, leg kicks, those little ankle kicks that he does that he threw against Neil Magny, stuff like that. But I think this is going to be a good fight. And really, this is kind of almost a must-win for Lorenz Larkin. He left a potential UFC title shot, or at least maybe one fight away from a title shot, to sign the big money in Bellator, the sponsorship money, all that. They give him a title shot as his first fight. All right, it didn't go his way, but then he gets not only beat by Paul Daly, which is, not a bad loss, but he gets scorched by Paul Daly in a fight everyone was picking him to win, and now he's taking on Fernando Gonzalez, who, yes, is a talented individual, but again, someone he should beat. And if he loses again, man, he starts looking like a bust, and the UFC looks like a genius for not, re-signing him. So I think this is a big deal for Lorenz Larkin, because all of a sudden he goes from being the hottest free agent in MMA to now being almost kind of washed up in a matter of a year.
Yeah. And they're, and being on the main event, it needs to be an exciting fight too, like you're saying.
He's the main event once again. You're right.
Yeah, he needs to pull in that draw, for this division, because that's one thing I know that Gonzalez was saying. He was frustrated. What I had read this morning, that there was lack of promotion with this fight. Well, obviously, just last weekend they had that big event that they were really having to push. But then these guys need to step it up. I mean, you're also someone that's having to meet at catch weight. So, is the company going to take you as serious with promoting this fight? And unless you can give us some exciting performances. So let's hope that this main event.
I feel like they promoted as much as they would for a card of this magnitude. I mean, yeah, this is a pretty good main event, regardless catchweight or 170. But you look at the rest of the card, Saeed Wad, J.J. Ambrose, those are not two names that are lighting up people's Google notifications, right? Kendall Grove versus A.J. Matthews. A.J. Matthews fought a lot of his career at welterweight, and Kendall Grove is, let's face it, he is on the backside of his career. Yeah. And then you have a guy, in fact, Bellator doesn't even have this guy's picture on their website right now, Kayla. Jake Smith is not a picture against Steve Kozala. So how excited can you get about that matchup?
Yeah.
So not saying he's not good. I'm interested in see how he does in his debut, 6-2 against 8-1. It seems like two young guys, but at the end of the day, no one knows who those people are. So how can you even say that's fair to promote those guys at the same level as Michael Chandler and Goto Yamauchi? You know what I mean? As Aaron Pico, who they've invested a lot of time and money in, as obviously Chael Sonnen and Rampage Jackson, and then two guys fighting for a world championship. Fernando Gonzalez could be disappointed, but it's been promoted the way that it should be promoted. Mm-hmm. Maybe if you win, maybe you'll get promoted then and actually make weight, right? Isn't that how you, right? All right. Let's move on to UFC now. We had enough Bellator talk. I think we hit our required Bellator talk limit. No, I'm kidding. UFC 220 happened at the same time as Bellator 192 on pay-per-view. I thought it was a fantastic night of fights. At least the main card was. I mean, 3 knockouts. The only fight that was kind of ho-hum was probably the Volante and Flasimar Bahozo, which anyone that watched my preview show last week, I pretty much said as much. That's probably what was going to happen, and that's what did happen. That wasn't that great of a fight. Volante came out on top, but again, not a guy that I think is elite or anything like that. And for Bahozo, he has pretty much been his career. I feel like, I don't know, I've never really been impressed by him in his career, and I didn't see that was going to change here against Volante. The whole night he was pretty much on his back foot, Volante moving forward. And I really felt Volante, if he would have just had a little more output in some of those situations, he had Francimar's back up against the cage. I felt like he could have got a finish, and I didn't see that output. I didn't really see like that killer instinct to put it away. It seemed like he was content landing a couple shots from the outside, resetting and chasing him back again. And after the fight, he seemed very elated to get the win, and I just felt the emotion he showed after that fight didn't match the emotion he was showing in the cage. So that was a little odd to me because it didn't seem to me like it was that great of a performance. I mean, yeah, he got the victory, but it still was a split decision.
Yeah.
And as crazy as that was, he's cheering, oh, I got the win. Yeah, thanks, Joe, and all this and that. And I was like, really? You just barely beat Francimar Bahozo? You shouldn't be celebrating. You should be like, I should have put that guy away. And that's a guy a couple years ago he probably would have put away. But now I don't know. I really think he needs to look at it because if he wants to get to the elite of the light heavyweight division, these are guys you can't just get by. These are guys you have to bury. And I didn't see that from Gian Volante.
Yeah, definitely one he'll have to go back and watch tape and kind of I guess get out of denial there. It's always funny when you see these guys that give dominant performances and they're saying in their post fight interview like, man, but there's so much else that I could have worked on and wanted to display. And then you see these guys or girls that will put on a performance that's like, and they're just really boasting and thinking that they did the most there. But
yeah, I don't know. Maybe he was hyped because, he's done a lot of training with Stipe Miocic, so maybe he was hyped that his boy Stipe was about to fight,
Yeah, I know.
All right, Rob Thomas, not Rob Thomas, the singer of Matchbox 20, or the kickboxer for glory. Rob Font took on Thomas Almeida. I had Thomas Almeida winning this fight. I did think it was going to be a close fight. And I thought Rob Font really impressed me. I was saying I was a little critical, saying, hey, you lost to Pedro Munoz, a fight that you were winning. You got caught in the submission. Now you're taking a guy I consider a better talent in Thomas Almeida. How are you going to fare? Also add in the added pressure of fighting in your hometown of Boston, Massachusetts. How are you going to deal with somebody like Almeida who has some serious power? First round I thought was pretty even. I thought both guys got some really good shots in. I'm actually going to double check the stats here. First round, 15 for Almeida, 23 for Font in terms of landed strikes. Font did have the missed takedown there. And then in round 2, I think Font was doing a good job walking Almeida down, kind of getting him on his back foot a little bit. And I think that was really the key to success because he was able to get him there, get him up against the fence, and that's when he was able to land that kick that started everything. And the kick obviously wobbled Almeida. He was then able to go in for a kill and not allow Almeida to recover. And I think that not only was a fantastic performance, I think it was a good adjustment in strategy. And 3, he had a chance to put someone away, and he did. He didn't let a dangerous guy come back, and he gets the biggest win of his career in his hometown. And he gets back on the winning track. He's going to shoot back up the rankings. And Rob Font, all of a sudden, is a dangerous guy in this division. They showed afterwards he's tied for the most finishes in UFC bantamweight history. So this is a guy that we talk about career progression earlier, Kayla. This is a guy that's progressing the right way. He was able to take a bad loss. Again, I'm not saying Pedro Munoz is a nobody. I'm saying that's a fight he should have won, and he knows it. And he could have just sat on the side like, oh, now I'm facing Tom Almeida. Boy, I don't know. No, that's not what he did. He rose to the occasion, and he got the finish, and he should feel really great about his performance. Conversely, Thomas Almeida, he's a guy right now that's kind of down in the dumps a little bit. He's lost 3 out of his last 4. A guy that was undefeated heading into the UFC, had some finish. Now he's hit some adversity. He's still a young guy, I believe only 26 years old. I'm really interested to see how he comes back, because right now it seems like guys have figured him out.
Yeah, no, I think like you said, hello Rob Font, what's next for you? And yeah, you said he's lost 3 of his last 4.
Almeida, yeah, Cody Garbrandt, Rivera, and Rob Font. And I think he had to win somewhere in there against somebody.
Oh yeah, against Albert Morales. Yeah, yep. I mean, again, Jimmy Rivera, Cody Garbrandt, top guy.
I mean, I'm not saying he's losing the slouches, but still.
But still, yeah, like you said, people have figured him out. He's definitely got to go back and figure out his game plan, because that's what I didn't catch that fight. I only caught the last, the co and the main, but that was from reading on it, just like you were breaking it down. It really came down to, like you said, when he got him on his back foot and like you said, figured him out. So hopefully he can go back in there and work on his strategy there. Number 10 bantamweight.
Also, shout Miles saying Justin Lawrence was on the card. It's weird they don't have Justin Lawrence on the main card for Bellator. The card I read off was the main card. It's on their website and everything. So kind of interesting they don't have Justin Lawrence. I would have put him over those other 2 matchups for sure. But again, they got to have a thing for the streaming or whatever. Coker always says that, but I don't know. I don't think that many people care about the Bellator undercard. Not yet, anyways. Maybe they will, but right now I would say put Justin Lawrence on the main card. Put him on there. All right. Now, Shane Burgos here against Mr. Qatar. I believe that's how they were saying his name. Calvin Qatar. This was a fantastic fight against 2 of the up-and-coming featherweights in the division. I was super stoked for this fight. I said it could steal the show. I think it did to an extent. I thought really the difference was going to be Burgos, his movement, and his boxing against the kicks of Calvin. I think that was going to be the really big difference. Pretty even in round 1. I probably would have gave it to Shane Burgos, even though Qatar did outstrike him 40-33. Round 2, another super close round. Burgos did up the intensity. He landed 57 of 103 to 36 for Calvin. But I thought Calvin landed a couple of those nice kicks. So however you would have scored it, I think both rounds are close. They were entertaining. Both guys weren't really grappling much. I mean, there was only 1 takedown attempted in the whole fight, and that was from Calvin in round 2. And so I thought it was even. I knew it was 1-1 going into round 3. And I was like, all right, this is going to be a good fight. And Calvin was just able to land a great combination. He caught Burgos kind of coming in. He caught it with the uppercut, and he put him away. Again, he had the opportunity to put a dangerous guy away, didn't allow Shane to get back up, and this was a great victory. It was a great combination, obviously, but it was one of those ones where it was kind of like whoever could land something like that first was probably going to get the victory. It just happened to be Calvin. And this is a kid that was thrown, not quite to the wolves, but was thrown kind of out there on like a week, 2 weeks notice against Andre Fili on a main card, obviously a very, very talented individual, beat him sound. Now he takes on a very talented, undefeated fighter in Shane Burgos and was not able to not just compete, which I knew he would be, but he gets the finish. It's the first time Shane Burgos has ever lost in his career, and in what was a great fight. I tell you what, I know Shane's going to be upset about this loss, but hold your head high. This was a competitive fight. You simply got caught. It happens to everybody. I think he will bounce back. But for Calvin, boy, this is a guy you got to look out for. I mean, this is a huge victory. I think bigger than the Fili one, if I'm being honest. I think Shane Burgos is better than Andre Fili. And you did so on a pay-per-view main card. You kept it exciting. And I'm really excited to see what this guy brings to the table, because I thought this was a fantastic fight. This was, I feel like, a coming-of-age fight to see if someone was legit. And I think Calvin Qatar is definitely legit featherweight.
Yeah, if they put him on the main card in that slot, they obviously saw the potential for this to be a big fight or an exciting fight. It looks like here they did win fight of the night. So like you said, Shane and Calvin should both be
proud of
their performances. But yeah, I mean, that's what we want out of this main event, is to have obviously the big names like the co and main event, but also to have these young guys that are coming in and going to start breaking through the divisions and give some of these top ranked guys some trouble. So I guess I'll have to try and find that fight to rewatch it, or not rewatch it, but watch it and catch that performance.
All right, co-main event of the evening: Daniel Cormier against Volkan Ozdemir. I think we pretty much thought this would go the way it would win. I think.
Oh,
Really,
good, you picked the champ.
yeah, I mean, of course, I picked Daniel Cormier. The only thing that was surprising was how much Cormier actually mixed it up with Volkan.
I
I think
know.
that
I
was
loved it.
the only real surprising thing. But I guess going back, you could say, well, he stood up a lot with Gustafsson, and yeah, he did. But considering everyone knew this was Volkan's really like only chance to win, I think that's why it was surprising. Because Gustafsson's a great striker, I wouldn't say it's quite one punch knockout power. Gustafsson usually sets things up with a good accumulation of strikes. Whereas Vulcan's, he's swinging for the fences. He has no time. We all know this. He has no time to be in there that long. But you could just tell when it got to the ground, he just didn't have nothing for Cormier. He had no defense. He had no submissions. And I really think after that first round where he tagged Cormier, he got taken down, almost submitted. I think right there, that takedown and near rear naked choke, I think right there Volkan was done.
Yeah.
I think he had already broke Volkan at the end of the first round. He had taken the best shots Volkan was going to throw at him. He took him down and nearly beat him in that first 5 minutes. And I think Volkan, he didn't really have much left at that point. And then heading into round number 2, it wasn't a question as much as would he get the finish. It would be when he got the finish. He was able to get the fight to the ground. He was froze up there. So, okay, hang on. I'm going to re-get around here. Sometimes that happens here. But as we're getting Kayla back connected. Oh, there you are. Froze out. No, but what I was saying is he had broke Volkan, I feel like, there, and it wasn't a matter of when he was going to get or if he was going to get the finish. It was a matter of when, and I think everybody knew that if he took him down again, he was probably going to get the finish in some fashion. He did. He got the crucifix position, and Volkan really had no chance from that standpoint. And very dominant win for Daniel Cormier, and it went the way I thought it would. And Ozdemir tried. He definitely hit some shots, but he's just at this stage right now. He just doesn't have those skills to compete with someone like Daniel Cormier.
Yeah, and I think that's really what everyone should kind of gain from both of these champion, fights on UFC 220. Like Daniel Cormier is saying, there are levels to this game. You have to evolve as a mixed martial artist to get these title shots or to be champion. And not that I'm sure Volkan wasn't aware of that, but maybe he really didn't know, the skill set, or he underestimated the skill set of Daniel Cormier. And I think what I really loved, the first round was probably one of the more exciting rounds I've seen in a long time. And I don't know if it was because, like you said, it was a little unexpected to see all those different levels of Daniel Cormier, but he just looked like he was having so much fun with it too. I think once he saw, like you said, that he had kind of broken or figured out Volkan, he just wanted to go out there and showcase why he's champ. And it was so exciting to see him, stand and trade with Volkan a little bit, get him to the ground, almost get that submission. So he's saved by the bell. I was kind of freaking out watching that first round, but I agree. I think that, he underestimated the champ, which is fine. I also want to say that it isn't only on Volkan's shoulders. We've talked about this before on the show, how I think fans, the promotion, and sometimes fighters alone, we kind of push these guys to go and get that title shot a little too soon because you see the potential there. But I'm wondering if it was a matter of that there was just not as many opponents, obviously, for Daniel Cormier, that maybe Volkan was pushed a little too quickly to get this title.
It was that, and I don't think they wanted to give another shot that quickly to Gustafsson, regardless of how great that first matchup was. Obviously, Gustafsson is, over in his title opportunities, and a lot of people kind of gave him flack when they gave Gustafsson title shot coming off a loss. And so I think to kind of, at least for one fight, distance them, they felt that Volkan had done enough to earn a title shot. and so why not throw him in there? And I think that's why. And I think we're going to really, for DC, a guy that says he plans to retire in 2019. So I'm imagining there's 2 fights left for DC. He has a rematch with Gustafsson. And to me, I think it's a matchup with Stipe Miocic. I really do. I know people are talking about John Jones this. He's lost to John Jones twice. I know he failed the test and it's a no contest. But how many times that matchup's been booked, how many times it's actually went place, I really just don't want to see John Jones against Daniel Cormier. I think juice or no juice, I'm not sure if he can beat John Jones. A lot of people, no one's technically beat John Jones. So, it's not like a shame or anything in that. It's just, I don't see how that, I don't know. I'd rather see John Jones fight some other people at this point in time. Rather see him fight Gustafsson again. I'd rather see him even fight someone like a Volkan Ozdemir. Rather see him possibly move up to heavyweight. Maybe that's in his future too. So I think there's a lot of good fights out there for John Jones, but for Daniel Cormier, those to me would be the best because you get to run back the Gustafsson fight. And I know he's buddies with Kane, and that's why he dropped down to 205. But let's be honest, I don't think Kane's coming back anytime soon. And if the UFC allows him to fight Stipe Miocic, which I think is a legitimate contender for Stipe, he can retire possibly as dual champion. And then you have Stipe fight Kane, his boy. He basically passes the torch to his boy Kane. Kane still gets the fight for the heavyweight championship. There's no conflict of interest or anything like that. And the light heavyweight division's already pretty shallow, but you have Gustafsson fight, take your pick. You know what I mean? The division is what it is right now. So that to me is, and not only that, those are big fights that can sell pay-per-views, and they're challengers worthy of Daniel Cormier fighting for his last fights as well. So that's why I see that as his best 2 options moving forward for his last 2 fights.
Yeah, I don't even want to, try and match fights for John Jones because it's like, why even talk about someone that we don't even know what's going on, with his career. So I think that although that could be something that DC still wants to, finish out his career with, I think it's silly to even bring up that name right now. But I do like that DC is already talking about a dates that he wants to go out on his terms. And I think, like you said, those 2 fights are kind of what I see him finishing out his career and finishing out in a proper way of a good send-off for him. And not, I knock on a lot of these super fights and guys moving from different, divisions against each other. But I think in this case with Stipe and Daniel Cormier, they have fought the majority of the guys in their division, if not almost like there's only like 1 or 2 options there of who they haven't fought besides these young guys coming up. But that's why, to me, that fight doesn't bother me so much that these 2 would go against each other, that Daniel Cormier has fought in that division before. So I agree with you. I think it's a fight that could sell, and it would be an entertaining fight.
Especially, I know a lot of people are talking about, Kane. Kane should be next. Kane hasn't fought in almost 2 years. Okay, I just... Is that guy warranted jumping up everybody else who's been fighting for these last 2 years, regardless of his previous success in the octagon? Because to me, he hasn't proven that he can be healthy. And if he's proven he can't be healthy, chances are they schedule that fight. What happens? He pulls out again, and they got to find somebody else who maybe isn't.
That would be the worst case scenario.
But how many times does he pull out of a fight, though, Kayla? That's almost more what's going to happen than him actually fighting.
I would hope that if he's talking and hinting at this comeback, I would hope that it's because he knows for sure, almost like a Khabib Nurmagomedov of like, don't get us excited anymore. Are you actually?
That's what I mean. People are like, well, he doesn't need a tuna fight. It's like, no, he doesn't need a fight to show that he's still good. He needs a fight to show up that he can show up, make weight, and not be hurt. You know what I mean?
But I think that fight also makes
octagon is secondary.
I think it also makes sense for Stipe too. People, that's the one fight that they want to see of Stipe kind of competing against these veterans of that division. So if it's a fight that makes sense for the champ too, to kind of add to his legacy, then I'm not opposed to that either. But
I want Kane against Stipe too, because that should be the match to make, but it's not. I'd rather have Stipe fight Daniel Cormier or a rematch against Verdum before Kane, because Or honestly, I'd love to see Kane Verdum too. Everyone says, well, if it was at sea level, he would have beat him. Let's prove it. Let's prove that he could show up and beat Verdum at sea level. All right, let's run that one back first. All right,
Maybe that's
and
title
have
eliminator.
Stipe fight Cormier. I mean, all right. Speaking of Stipe, gets the victory, 5-round decision. Went how I thought it would. I knew Francis would touch him a few times. It was just a matter of could Stipe recover to get the fight to the ground, where, again, much like the Cormier fight, you knew he had the superior skills and advantage. And also, if it went deeper in the fight, you knew he was going to have the better conditioning. And that's what won out. I mean, Francis hung in there tough. You know, he was still swinging till the end, but he just doesn't have those skills. He just doesn't have those wrestling skills. And while, yeah, he didn't get maybe seriously as beat up as Ozdemir, I think it was the 4th round. It was probably the worst round in terms of him really kind of starting to get beat up. And I think at that point, you could really see Stipe starting to tire just from the amount of volume and work to hold a man of that size down.
Right.
And I think a lot of people are like, oh, you should just put him away and stuff like that. It's like, I think they're underestimating how much strength and energy it takes just to hold someone like that down.
Yeah, and
that adds into it as well. It's not just simple the fact like, oh, he has him in, kind of that referee's position. He should just be able to pound him away. It's like, well, he does have to hold him there, because if he lets up, he just stands up. You know what I mean? You have to keep constant weight and pressure on the guy to hold them in that position. And so that's why he didn't put him away from those positions, because if he doesn't, a guy that strong is just going to bull rush you right off you. And again, and then once you're at the feet, you have to try to re-engage and come in and miss one of those uppercuts. So you have to just worry about position first, then striking. So from that standpoint, it was a very dominant performance. I think Francis will be back. Again, this was his first career loss, and it was in a title fight. The dude's going to be back. Again, he's the young guy in the heavyweight division at 32. So he's going to be back. He's going to learn from this, and I think we're going to see a better Francis Ngannou moving forward. And for Stipe, he did what he had to do. He proved that he's the baddest man on the planet and the UFC heavyweight GOAT by getting his 3rd consecutive title defense, and he did so against a very credible opponent. A lot of people were questioning kind of Francis. I don't know if he should get it and stuff, but I think that was a very deserving contender. Just Stipe was able to outclass him there towards the end.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he was a very deserving contender. And I think, like you're saying, he's not an easy man to put away. He's not an easy man to dominate in a fight like Stipe has done. But that's why, again, I was a little frustrated with how many people were just kind of throwing out the champs at UFC 220. Stipe is the champ for a reason, and he showed us why, with that fight. I found it really interesting that there were so many moments of Stipe kind of just basically, putting his body weight on Francis for so long, and the ref not separating them, or fans not booing, that strategy. And in a lot of cases, fans, commentators, everyone will say, oh, come on, there's not as much activity. Like, what is he doing? He's just laying on him. But in this fight, it made sense, because we all know how big, how strong Francis Ngannou is, that was a strategy that won him the fight. That was part of it, that he had to just really put all of his weight and tire Francis out. The only thing that I want to say that I'm a little frustrated with is, again, I think that Francis, more than Volkan, was a little bit more deserving of this title shot, of that knockout power, and of being so dangerous. And I also agree. I think that's why, there wasn't a finish there, because Francis, even as tired as he was in that 5th round, all it takes is one. We've seen it. And I think the thing that frustrated me with him, though, is you're going against the champ. You're saying that you feel like you could be a future champ against a very, stacked division of dangerous men, and you didn't, train and get your conditioning better than that. I mean, I don't want to take away from Stipe, but I also just feel like it was a lack of preparation and maybe a little bit of ignorance of what it takes to be a champion, and resting on that, dominant skill of knockout power. So that's what I was a little bit frustrated with, is if you're going in with 5 rounds, I just don't, he was already tired after the 1st round. And I feel like, I don't know if it was lack of preparation or what. I know that's what everyone's kind of talking about this week, but
I'm going to disagree just a little bit, because I don't think it was lack of preparation. I just think in the heavyweight division, it's a little different on your conditioning. You know, we're talking about a dude that's 6'4", walks around, 280 pounds. Dudes like that, with that size and strength, aren't really meant to go and do an activity like that at a high level for 25 minutes. Like realistically, they're not. They're not really made for that. And so that's why when you see somebody like a Stipe or even a DC or obviously Kane in his prime, those dudes are freaks. And so I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe he could have done a little bit more, and I think that is fair, Caleb. But I think there's only so much more he can do. He's just such a massive man. There's just your conditioning can only hold you for so long. And I think the thing that could have maybe helped him with is a lot of those shots were looping. They weren't straight shots, because the more wind up, that just little things to preserve his cardio. So I think that's where I agree with you with. I don't think it was a lack of preparation. I think there are things he could have done to preserve his energy. He could have, knowing that Stipe was going to take him down, he really could have sat and waited for the uppercut, because he had the longer reach. He didn't have to he didn't have to come to Stipe. Stipe had to come to him. And so I think that little extra edge and strategy may have helped his conditioning. Maybe it wouldn't have. I don't know. But that's why I agree with you that that's something he could have implemented to help his conditioning. But I'm not sure if it was because of lack of preparation. I kind of go maybe on lack of strategy, because I think in other fights he really hasn't had to have much of a strategy. There were other guys that were.
Let's hope that it was more that
he was going to go in there and smash him. But this guy, that's not what was going to happen. Now, yeah, he tagged him. He came close. But a guy of Stipe's caliber, you can't expect that you were going to put him away in the first round. You had to prepare that if you were going to put him away, had to be second or third. So throwing all your eggs in that first round basket like he kind of did, it completely backfired on him. So I think that was more on a strategy more so than lack of preparation.
Yeah, let's hope that it was more that he just underestimated the champ and it wasn't lack of preparation. Either way, no matter what it was, I'm sure that this is going to be a learning fight for him and Vulcan. And I agree. I think that he's going to come back and just be even more dangerous than he is. We have a question from Brad. Can I raise
Stipe is not happy about the UFC not promoting him and hyping Francis. Heavyweight champion is promoted as baddest man on the planet. Francis has that. Stipe's too nice of a guy. Being a nice guy gets you nowhere in this sport. I mean, I don't think that's a Stipe problem. I think that's a UFC problem, because they have a lot of champions who are considered nice guys. Was GSP a big, scary dude? GSP's a pretty nice guy, right?
I feel like
GSP was promoted pretty well during his tenure.
Yeah, Chael Sonnen, I think, kind of explained it perfectly. He said he has noticed in this sport, he says it goes from the entertainment era and then it goes down to like the competitive era and skill, and goes, it's like it's a ride. And right now we're in the entertainment era after Conor McGregor, after, other names that have been building fights that way. And maybe we're going to see a turn in 2018 or 2019 where it's going to go back to, hey, this guy might not be a big talker, but his skills are doing the talking, and that's okay. Yeah,
because Stipe has been entertaining. I mean, even this fight, he didn't get the finish, but I did thought it wasn't a fight where I was like, oh boy, I got to turn this off or anything like that. And you look at his previous fights, obviously. Look at his fight against Arlovski. He knocked out the dude in 30 seconds. Look at the fight he won the title. Counter right hook, 2 minutes, stunning a crowd in Brazil. And then beating Alistair Overeem in his hometown of Cleveland, where it sounded like a bomb went off because the crowd was that loud. 18,000 people in Cleveland had just celebrated one of their biggest achievements in sporting in Cleveland. I mean, the dude's been I think great. But no, I still disagree.
Brad,
trying to be mean. I just disagree, because I don't think they haven't been promoting him correctly. I feel like they've been promoting him justly. He's been the main event. He's been the focal point. I think in this case, they were trying to hype up Francis because, again, a lot of people thought, well, maybe he didn't deserve it. So I think they were really trying to push that this guy was a legitimate contender because Stipe had already been put there. I don't think it was a case of them over-promoting Francis Ngannou. I think they were trying to showcase this is the new young guy that's coming in there. Let's see if he can do it against kind of guy that's been the standard. Obviously, he's about to break the record for the heavyweight division. So I feel like Stipe's been well. If he disagrees, that's his prerogative. I mean, maybe obviously he's a little closer to the situation, but I feel like I follow the sport pretty close. I don't feel like he's been slighted or neglected more than any other previous heavyweight champion or any other champion currently on the UFC roster. But I think it's a problem the UFC has had with some champions. Obviously, look at Mighty Mouse. People talk about, oh, they don't promote him. He's just too nice of a guy, even though he's dominant. So I think it's just, you can make a case the UFC's had a quote-unquote problem promoting nice guys regardless of the division. I think that, and look at Kane. Yeah, Kane's a monster in the cage, but Kane's a pretty nice guy. He's not a guy that talked trash. And you can make a case that even Junior Dos Santos, guys that were his two previous champions, those guys were promoted, I thought, well, as the baddest man, and those were not dudes trash talking. So I feel like they've been doing what they have been doing. I don't feel like anything has really changed in terms of the heavyweight division. I do get your point, but I don't feel I don't think it's as big a slight as Stipe thinks it is. I just maybe think he's taking it a little too personally.
I think that Francis Ngannou has an amazing highlight reel, and they know that people want knockouts. They know that everyone's attention span is like so short now. So if you see a quick promo of some guy literally putting Alistair Overeem close to death on the ground with an uppercut, they know that that's it's gonna get someone's attention to tune in and say, whoa, this guy has a title shot against a man who is about to make history in his division. So I think that I think they promoted it well. I would hope, it's unfortunate that Stipe feels like he's still not being respected as a champion, because I thought that's why we waited so long to see him back, is I thought they finally came under agreement with their contract to where he was feeling like he was paid enough or going to be promoted enough. And then adding to, Brad is saying, I think you would agree that they would prefer Francis to win by KO and hold the belt. He's a seller. I don't think so after this fight, because Francis couldn't go 5 rounds. So I think that if they were on Francis's hype train, I think that that's someone they're gonna, yes, eventually build up. But he clearly has some stuff he's got to work on if he wants to be champion.
This was his first fight as the main event. So I don't know how you can say he's the better seller. Mm-hmm. The dude hardly talks English. That's a fact. So if anything, I would say he's a worse seller.
Worldwide.
Endears you with fans and stuff, the ability to speak the language. And obviously that's getting better. I'm not trying to be knock on the guy, but that's just a fact. If I went to France and tried to be a star in France and I could barely speak French, it would take me a while. You know what I mean? To really accept that. That's all I'm trying to say. But I don't think they would have preferred him to win. I think they would have preferred a finish by either guy. I think that was true, because I think in that 5th round we could tell that both guys were tired and stuff. He was favored. He was favorite. He wasn't favored to me. I didn't pick him to win.
Me neither.
So being favored to win has nothing to do with the UFC. Other people make the odds. The UFC doesn't make the odds. So even if he was favored to win, I don't know if that means the UFC wants him to win. I don't, because then you can't. I don't know. Then they wouldn't have gave him the shot, or something. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I guess maybe we're beating a dead horse here. We're going on semantics here, Brad. I appreciate all these comments and stuff, but I don't think they would have preferred him to win. I think they would have preferred a finish by either guy, but I don't think specifically Francis. Because if Stipe went out there and finished him in the 2nd round, then maybe they really would have been pushing the hype train. But now they're like, well, now he just outlasted them and stuff. So I don't know. But he won the fight. I think Francis will be back. He'll learn from it. You can say, Brad, that maybe now he will become a better seller because he's had that exposure. He's had that build up. And I think people are going to be intrigued what he does next to see how he comes back from this loss. And so I think it will help him in Curry, even though he didn't win. It's going to be a learning experience, and I think will help them promote him in the future. Because, like I said, he kind of is the future at 32 years old. So that's what I'm saying. Like, he still has a lot of fight left in him.
For sure.
All right, let's get to UFC on Fox 27. 4 fights here on the main card. Not a typical Fox card, Kayla. And I am a fan of Jacare, have been for a very long time. But I would say of Fox cards, I would say this one's kind of one of the really this one. I think they did one in Long Island last summer. That was the Weidman Gastelum. That one wasn't particularly stacked either. Do you think that has to do with just how many cards, or do you think it's just the fact that the Fox deal might not be continuing on after this year, and there's not really an incentive for the UFC to load up these events like they had done in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be either of those or both things coming into play. But that is a good point that you bring up. That Fox deal is on its end there and still in question whether they're going to continue with them. I'm a fan of Frank Camacho. I'm a fan of the men on the main card. I mean, there are some exciting fights here, but again, similar to Bellator, it's hard after we're coming from such an exciting weekend. I mean, look, we're an hour and a half in talking about all this MMA because we had so much to talk about. So it might just also be that we were so hyped from last weekend that we're kind of looking at this card and, thinking, but I don't know. Sometimes these fight nights are the ones that you sleep on and give us great performances. So let's hope for that.
And honestly, speaking of Camacho, I don't get why him against Drew Dober's at 170. But I don't think this was a short notice fight from what I remember. And Drew Dober's like 5'8". He's not a very big welterweight. In fact, if you go to like Tapology, both guys are listed as lightweight. So I'm not really sure why this is at 170. I think Camacho, hasn't he had some problems with cutting weight?
I think so, yeah.
Did he miss, what fight was
it? Oh, you know what it is? You know what? Why? This is what I read.
Because remember, he missed weight against Damian Brown in his last fight by 5 pounds.
Yeah.
Yes,
so here's what it is. Dober, he actually fought, I think his last fight was in California, and because of the CASC, he had an issue with getting rehydrated, and according to their new rules that they're trying to in place, he is not able to go and fight at lightweight. He had to go back up to welterweight. So that's what's going on here. And then, yes, I think because Frank Camacho had some trouble making weight last time, I think
even though this fight's in North Carolina?
His what?
Even though this fight's in North Carolina and not in California?
But there's something with the rules that once you've fought in California and under those rules, your next fight is because of those issues. It moves, I think, into your next, I want to say 3 fights, so you can't fight at that division.
Well, all right. I appreciate the explanation because I think from the outside looking in, that's very odd. But I guess for both guys, it helps, even though Drew Dober did make weight for his last event, and he won his fight. Whatever. But for Camacho, obviously a guy that, did miss weight. So I guess it's basically 2 lightweights not cutting weight. But I think it's intriguing. I thought Dober had a very good performance, a guy that typically doesn't get a lot of knockouts in his career. Knocking out Josh Berkman I thought was very impressive. And Camacho, obviously, I thought his fight against Damian Brown was fantastic. I believe it was the fight of the night. Absolutely fantastic fight. A split decision, got the victory. Obviously, missing weight kind of sucked. That kind of took a little bit of the fun out of it, him getting the victory, because you're kind of like, wow, what if he actually would have made weight instead of, missing 5 pounds? How much would that have been a difference for Brown and whatnot? But now that shouldn't be an issue for him. And so we can kind of see maybe almost the real Frank Camacho. We'll see if, what he does against a guy that I would consider a very solid competitor in Drew Dober, a guy that is a tough wrestler. Obviously, he showed from this fight, and obviously the Jason Gonzalez fight wasn't that long ago. That guy that is starting to get some power. You add the fact that he's not going to have to cut the weight either. Maybe that allows him to even throw harder with more, more output, because he doesn't have to worry about, like you said, rehydrating and as much that. So I think it's an intriguing matchup. I hope both guys are able to get to 55, because I think that especially for Drew, is a better weight class for him. I mean, Drew's only 5'8". I don't think that he has a lot of business fighting at 170 some other guys. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be the wrestling of Drew to see how he mixes that in with his striking against the kind of power and forward movement of Frank Camacho. That's how I see, both guys' strategies playing out here for the main card.
Yeah, people are saying they're trying to open up this fight night with a slugfest. like you mentioned, all those factors coming into play. If these guys are more comfortable at this weight class, hopefully they're going to perform at even, more exciting levels. But we know that Frank Camacho gives exciting fights, Dober as well. They're going to go in there. Frank Camacho puts the pressure on. I like to see him perform. To me, he gets me excited for each matchup that he has, because you know that he's going to go out there and brawl. I'm trying to look up, and maybe I can send this to you off air, or we can bring it up next time. But it is saying with the California rules, repeat weight miss offenders will be recommended to go up to the next weight class. And I think I'd even seen something, with this Bellator fight last weekend, that there was something that they had to sign. If you're at a certain percentage, your next fight will not be, in that weight division. So I don't know. Maybe Dober doesn't want to be at 170, but he kind of was just forced to, with these new rules implemented. But either way, I think it's going to be an exciting one to start the night.
Yeah, I'm excited for that one. I'll try to get Drew after the fight. I've spoken with him a couple times. Really nice dude. The next fight, super excited for this one. Obviously, Gregor Gillespie is a guy that is definitely a young up-and-coming guy here in the lightweight division, 10-0 so far in his career. He's taking on Jordan Rinaldi. I believe our friend Miles did a preview on Rinaldi as well as Gillespie for this matchup, so check those out on the MMA UK website. Rinaldi is coming off a submission victory over Alvaro Herrera, which was his first victory in the UFC. That was back in August of last year. Lost his debut to Abel Trujillo back in May of 2016. Gillespie is a guy, like I said, undefeated, 10-0. In his last fight, I thought looked fantastic against Jason Gonzalez, was able to get the submission victory. Obviously, his second fight in the UFC is the one that really got him a lot of attention, knocking out Andrew Holbrook in 21 seconds. Yeah, and he also has a win in 2016 in September over Gilaco Franca, if I said that correctly. So 3-0 so far here. He's definitely a guy that can be touched. He's not untouchable, but he's a guy that has proved that he has a good chin, he has good conditioning, and he's a guy that if you give him the opportunity, he puts you away. That's what he's shown so far in the UFC. And Rinaldi, I'm not saying he has no chance, but I would say compared to the guys that Gregor's already fought, UFC and even out of the UFC, I'm not sure if Rinaldi's that much better than any of those guys. So I think this is a fight Gregor should win. For Gillespie, I think his best chance, obviously he does have quite a few submission victories in his career. In fact, he only has one knockout victory. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, let's see here, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of 13 are by submission. So I would say if you're Jordan Rinaldi, the better on the ground is what it's going to be. I'm not saying pull guard, but I'm saying look for those opportunities in the scrambles and the counters, the fakes and feints, getting up against the cage, because Gregor's going to be aggressive. He's going to come out. That's what he's been doing. He's going to come out and throw punches. You got to be able to, either parry these, slip those, and then work for the takedown, because while Gregor, I think, is a competent ground fighter, you got to say that putting it on the ground makes it a little more 50-50 or even 60-40 in favor of Rinaldi. The longer it stays standing, you got to believe Gregor Gillespie is the better fighter.
Well, that's funny that you say all of this because, well, one, everyone's talking about how the UFC is really pushing these guys because both guys, made it to the road to the octagon, had quite a big appearance on there. So, yes, like you said, they're two names that are getting a lot of hype and for good reason. But that was something that I had read that Rinaldi had spoken of he's very tricky in the guard, and he knows that though Gregor's, has that wrestling background, that's kind of where he sees the fight playing out and adding to that list of submission wins.
Yeah, and I think that's gonna be a really big key. Who's better in the guard? Is it gonna be Gregor with the top pressure and obviously punching, or is it gonna be Rinaldi with the submissions and jiu-jitsu? Is he going to be able to get a sweep? Is he going to be able to get a submission? Is he going to be able to threaten enough or shut down Gregor enough to make him rethink that I should just stay standing? You know, that's a big deal too. It's not just simply threatening with submissions. If he can stifle the offense, that can kind of frustrate a guy too.
So that's exciting, Jim. We're going to open up the main card with the slugfest, most likely a slugfest, and then see some nice groundwork in the second fight in.
I think so. And I'm excited for that one because I know a lot of people are thinking, is Gregor Gillespie real? Well, here's his chance. He's taking a guy that, again, maybe he's not as good as some of the other guys he's fought, but I think a solid opponent, and he's taken on in his hometown too. Rinaldi is from Charlotte.
That's right,
so,
yeah.
You know the crowd's going to be behind him. Andre Fili, Dennis Bermudez in the co-main event. Obviously, Bermudez is been a perennial top 10 contender in this featherweight division. Very strong wrestler, very powerful striker. Fili's kind of been hit or miss. He's had some great performances. He's looked bad in fights. Case in point, that Calvin Kattar fight. Everyone thought, oh, here's this guy. He's just taken on short notice. He should beat this guy. Got dominated. And I feel like that had to be a very disheartening night for Mr. Fili, who definitely has a lot of potential. And now he's taking on a guy who, he bounced back. He beat Artem Lobov for what that's worth. I mean, I'm being honest for what that's. I mean,
everyone just throws away any win against Artem Lobov is just thrown away. So, it doesn't count.
Yeah, take that for what that's worth. And now he's taking on. Arguably, this is probably the best guy that Fili has fought, probably since his second ever fight in the UFC where he fought Max Holloway. You know what I mean? Like, if you look at some other guys he's fought, Jeremy Larson, Felipe Arantes, Pepe, Gabriel Benitez, Yair Rodriguez,
Rodriguez,
Calvin Kattar, Artem Lobov. So, I mean, you really make case Dennis Bermudez is either the best guy or the second best guy, because that was a young Max Holloway. I mean, that was Max in, what year was that? 2014.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, Max was still good, but he wasn't at this level. So that's what I'm saying. This is a dangerous fight. I think Dennis Bermudez does all the things well that Andre Fili doesn't do. He's not a particularly great wrestler. Dennis Bermudez is a good wrestler. Andre Fili is not a particularly overly strong individual. Dennis Bermudez is a pretty strong individual. Andre Fili doesn't hit particularly hard. Dennis Bermudez hits particularly hard. So I think this is going to be a very tough matchup for Andre Fili. Despite working out with a lot of good wrestlers and what, I think it's going to be hard for him to stop the takedown. And even if he can, I think his striking his last couple fights, I don't think he uses that height and reach as well as he could. And that's where he's allowed guys like Calvin Kattar and Artem Lobov, he beat Lobov, to be able to land some powerful shots. And so I'll put it out there. Let's see if he can make those adjustments, because I don't think he's fought particularly well in his last couple of fights. So let's see if he's able to make those adjustments. He actually use that height and reach to his advantage and stop the takedown. If he can do all those things, he can beat somebody like Dennis Bermudez. But if he hasn't made those adjustments in the game, then he's going to have another L on his record.
Yeah, no, people speak of his, defense against wrestling, those head kicks, but I think, like you mentioned, his opponents or list of opponents haven't been someone like a Dennis Bermudez that's very strong with his wrestling game. But I just really am believing a lot in the potential of Team Alpha Male lately. The last few fights that I've seen of their athletes coming out and just really, like you're saying, working on what they need to change in their game, I feel like you've seen a lot of fighters really just improve within this last year and start to move up those rankings. So I don't know. I'm not going to count Andre Fili out. I would hope that Team Alpha Male, is taking this fight serious, because, like you said, it might be his toughest opponent to date, and hopefully they've trained and worked on the skills that he needs to go in there and at least give us a good show for it being a co-main event.
All right, main event. I'm a huge Jacare fan. Okay, I don't think there's been no miss. Anyone that's followed me over the years knows I've always been a huge fan of Jacare. I love the fact that it's just one name. I don't think his real name's actually Ronaldo Souza. He should just get a change to Jacare on his official Brazilian identification. So Jacare against Derek Brunson. Obviously a rematch. These two fought in Strikeforce. It was actually, and I'm pretty sure still, the only knockout finish of Jacare's career. It really kind of at the time thought, well, Jacare, maybe he's a legit contender now to be one of the best middleweights in the world. His stand-up has improved because he got the strikeout over a young, hungry wrestler in Derek Brunson. Now, at this point, I think it's like nearly 7 years later, 6 or 7 years later,
Yeah,
Derek Brunson has developed into one of the best middleweights in the division. He took a guy that was pretty much kind of a boring, lay and pray wrestler. When he first entered the UFC, he was not a guy that was very exciting, not a guy that was particularly putting people away, not a guy people thought could challenge for a title. Now that has changed. This is a guy that is strong. He hits hard. He hits often, and he's going to go in there and he's going to make you do something. He's going to force you to do something, force you to take him down, or force you to stand up and bang. And now he's had some losses, that's for sure, but he's been competitive in all those fights against top guys. You know, he hasn't had a fight against top guys. Even the fights against Whitaker and Silva, which he lost, those are fights where he could have won. He had chances to win. He wasn't able to. Now, here's a fight where he had lost before, and this is Derek Brunson's really big chance to kind of get back into title contention. He had the win over Machida. Okay, that was nice. I'm not denying that. But let's see if he can do it again. Let's see if he can be another top guy. Let's see if he, and again, we mentioned hometown earlier with Rinaldi. This is Brunson's hometown. This is a big deal. Not only is he the main event, he's what people are coming in North Carolina are to see. And so not only is this a chance to get a win back, this is a chance to kind of reassert himself as a top contender. Because I felt like he could have been, had he beat Robert Whitaker in his hometown, what was that, a year, 18 months ago. So now here's his chance in his hometown to resend him as a top contender. And for Jacare, obviously, did not look very good in that Robert Whitaker fight. Robert Whitaker was able to stop the takedown and piece him up. And that should be Derek Brunson's strategy as well. Stop the takedown and piece him up. Because if we all know it goes to the ground, the Gator will get you. He is that good. And as a guy who just started jiu-jitsu, Jacare has probably forgotten more stuff about jiu-jitsu than I've learned in the last 5 months. You know what I mean? So this guy is just an absolute wizard. It doesn't matter if he's on the top, the bottom, or the side, or if he has you up against the cage.
Natural
he has a move
now.
to put you away. And so if you're Brunson, you don't want to be near this guy at all. You don't want to have a lot of contact. You want to be able to throw your bombs at range and sprawl and brawl. That's what you want to do. And if you're Jacare, you want to get this thing to the ground. You want to be on top. And because if you get there, there's nobody in the world that really can stop you from doing what you want to do.
Yeah, I think, adding to everything you just mentioned, him being in his hometown, he's evolved as a fighter. He's probably evolved because of that last fight with Jacare. That's what really, sunk in that, hey, there's levels to this game and I got to, go in there and go back to the drawing board. And yes, I think he's had success and has, beaten a lot of some of these top guys. But one thing to note is most of his losses are against at least those top 5 in the division, and that's where Jacare is sitting nice and pretty because he can hang there with those guys because of his experience level and just well-rounded, skills. So it's going to be interesting. It's just going to be nice to see how much Derek has evolved, how much he wants this revenge fight, and if that hometown, allure and support can help him get this win and help his confidence. I have to say, Jackson Wink has had, I don't know if it's cursed at the moment or what, but they're really having trouble with a lot of their fighters coming out and pulling off a win. So I don't know. That's something.
I don't know. Brunson. Since the Jacare loss, Brunson's been 9-3 in his career with losses to Whitaker, Anderson Silva, and Yoel Romero. I feel like he's fared very well.
Like he's the top 5 guys.
Yeah, and he's beaten solid names: Lorenz Larkin, Uriah Hall, Leona Machida, Dan Kelly, and even the Sam Alvey fight I think was particularly big at the time it went down. And like we said, he's not just like decisioning these guys; he's putting them away. He only has 2 decision victories in the UFC. He has one over Lorenz and his first ever UFC fight against Chris Lieben. Everybody else, he's finished. He mostly been knocking him out, but he actually submitted Brian Houston back in 2013. So, and you could make a case that he won the Anderson Silva fight. Brad's comment, he's going to have problems in the clinch. I think that's the X factor. That's going to be the not coup de grace, the piece de resistance of this fight, Brad, is who's going to win the clinch battle. If Jacare wins, he's going to win this fight. If Brunson wins, he's probably going to land a knockout and win. That's really, it's crucial. Will he have some problems in the clinch? He could. I think the one thing that's going to help Derek Brunson is the fact that this is a 25-minute fight. Because I feel like Jacare at this stage in his career, let me double check. I think Jacare is he 39, 40? I'm going to double check the age here. He's 38. He was actually born in 1979, so he's actually about to be 39 years old. There aren't too many fighters still competing in professional athletics that were born in the 70s. So, Jacare's been there. You can make a case he is kind of towards the downside of his career. His last fight didn't look particularly great. Now, that's not to say that he's completely done, but I think the age has finally kind of caught up to him a little bit. I think that's fair. I think Jacare would admit that as well. So I think Jacare has to be a little more perfect to get the victory, because Brunson could be a little wild and land one of those haymakers and win the fight. Whereas Jacare, even though he did knock out Brunson, 6 years ago, I don't see that happening again. I think if Jacare is going to win, he's either going to submit him or ride out a decision. And if Brunson's going to win, he's going to knock him out. Brunson comes out very aggressive. I mean, if you look at his last couple, really other than the Anderson Silva fight, almost all his fights, win or lose, have not gone to decision. Besides the Silva fight, his only other decision in the last 4 years was against Lorenz Larkin. So this is not a dude that has typically gone to the judges' scorecards. So it's a matter of Jacare being able to weather that early storm, get the takedown, and possibly the submission in round 2. So that first round, I think, is going to be really key for this fight. And I actually don't expect this fight to go past the third. I think it's going to get a finish one way or the other. And I think it's going to be entertaining. I think it's a good main event, even if it's a card that just, isn't as quite as big as other previous ones.
Yeah, and I think that, if Derek Brunson can pull out a win and get this revenge win in his hometown, it's also just really going to elevate him to now he can be considered to go, and whether it's get rematches against some of these guys, get another shot at Whitaker, he'll be taken more seriously, that he's learned from fighting these top experienced guys and now being able to get in there and fight with them. But we are almost hitting 2 hours, so I say that we put in some
Yeah, we got to get to some predictions here, and thank everyone for sticking with us. But we just had so much to cover. I know I was like, man, I don't even know if we could stick to an hour and a half. I just knew we had so much to cover because of the magnitude. But thanks for everybody sticking with us. And yeah, Brad, that's a good point to bring up. Brunson has, you could say, has faltered against the elite guys. And again, is this a moment where he's going to falter again, or is he going to be able to rise to the occasion in his hometown? We'll find out on Saturday night. All right, we got Drew Dober against Frank Camacho. I'm going to go Drew Dober. I think Frank Camacho is going to be a little bigger, a little stronger, but I like the wrestling skills of Drew Dober, and I think that gives him a little bit of an edge, and so that's why I'm going to pick him to win.
I'm going to pick Frank Camacho. I don't know if it's just because I'm such a fan, but I'm a believer in his skills and giving us an exciting fight. And I think that, he the way that he pulled off of a win at being 155 and not being comfortable there, I think that he's just going to excel at 170.
Gregor Gillespie against Jordan Rinaldi in lightweight. I like Rinaldi's submission skills, but I like Gregor Gillespie. I think he will prove he's the real deal. So I'm going to go with Gregor Gillespie to win this one.
I think Rinaldi is going to upset this hype train of Gregor and pull off another submission win with his tricky guard.
I hope so. I'd like to see it. We'll see. Dennis Bermudez against Andre Fili. I think I kind of gave my pick away, but I'm going Dennis Bermudez. I'm kind of down on Andre Fili right now. I think he's a nice guy. I think he has a lot of potential. I really do, but hasn't been able to kind of put it together as of late. I know Dennis Bermudez, he's a guy that has had struggled against the elite, but Andre Fili's not the elite right now. So I'm going to go with Dennis Bermudez.
Man, we are just disagreeing this whole time. I think that I'm going to believe in Andre Feely, and I'm going to say that I think it's because he is going to be one of those guys that, like we're saying, of progressing and working on watching a few of your fights, tape back, fixing those holes in your game, and I think he's going to come through. I'm just such a believer in Team Alpha Male and what they're doing right now.
Main event of the evening, Jacare against Derek Brunson. I don't know if I've ever picked against Jacare in his career in any single fight I've ever done picks for the last 11 years. However, I'm finally going to pick against Jacare. I know it's going to shock a lot of people out there. I'm sure my boy Billy is probably going to text me and say, well, how are you not picking your boy Jacare? But I just feel like Derek Brunson right now is going to be hard for him to handle. I hate to admit it. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm going to go with Derek Brunson in this one.
Yeah, I'm on the fence with this one because I think that Derek Brunson, we're going to see the best Derek Brunson. Well, not the best, but I just think that he is continuing to evolve and all of these fights that he's had against these top elite guys. I think again he's evolving too to get back to those title talk. But as much as people want to say Jacare is old and slowing down, I don't think that I see him, on retirement's knocking on retirement's door. I think I still believe in a lot of his skills, and I just think that he has more to his game and is going to be able to, again, figure Brunson out and get a finish.
All right, she is Kayla Beatty. You can follow her on Twitter and Instagram at fangirl_MMA. I am Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham, and then it's the Jim Graham on Instagram as well. Any other final thoughts before we end here?
No, thank you guys for sticking with us. Like Jim said, we had so much MMA to talk about. We will be back next week to see who wins with, we picked opposite opponents in this whole fight night. So it'll be interesting to recap and talk about all this.
All right. Thanks to everyone who tuned in on MMA UK and MMA World and obviously watched the replay on the Beyond the Cage YouTube channel. So until next week, for Kayla Beatty, I am Jim Graham. Thank you for watching another edition of Beyond the Cage. Goodbye, everybody.